Writer's Dream. This is a forum where authors are able to talk about their books, how they wrote them, how they published them, and how they market them. It's also a place where people can come and find out how a story becomes a book. If any of you who are watching this show would like to ask a question of the Writer's Dream, we do have a way that you can do that. You can go on the Facebook page by the name, The Writer's Dream, and ask the questions, and we'll get back to you with an answer. Our guest today is Alexa Rivadeneira. She is the author of Confessions from the Heart of a Teenage Girl.
Hi, Linda.
Hi,
Thanks for
Alexa.
having me.
It's nice to have
You
you here,
too.
too. Alexa and I have a history.
Yes, we
Alexa is actually the young lady who kicked off my career as a writer.
Giving me a lot of credit.
No, she actually did. And she was in high school at the time, and she was running a fundraiser. Those of you who watch the show on a regular basis may notice that there's a kind of a theme that runs through a lot of the authors we have on the show, is that a lot of them are fundraisers. And she was running a fundraiser for juvenile diabetes through the Junior Rotary Club.
Yeah, it was from Interact, and it was for the juvenile diabetes and a disease called neurofibromatosis. So we split the proceeds to both of those foundations.
And so I found out through a woman who's in Rotary Club that she was doing it, so I emailed Alexa and I asked her if I could participate, and she said yes. So she kicked off my marketing career, and I thank you very much.
No problem. We're happy to have you.
She is currently a student at University of Delaware, majoring in sociology, and she is interning this summer where? You want to tell us about your internship?
Yeah, I'm interning at an organization, a nonprofit in New York City called The Door, and it's for disadvantaged youth. So I'm an intake counselor, so I basically sit down with all the children that come through and hear their story and then refer them to all the services that we have to offer.
Yeah, that's a very important thing today, because a lot of kids are homeless.
Yeah, I had 3 homeless cases yesterday.
It's a huge problem, and it's nice that you're able to do that. So you started your writing career at the age of
10.
10.
Yeah.
And what did you write?
When I was 10, I just started writing short stories, and then the short stories kind of evolved into longer stories. So before Confessions, I had written 2 short novels. I want to say they were about 85 to 100 pages, and they just kind of were from my imagination. So one of them took place in California, and it was about a girl that got kidnapped. They were kind of far-fetched stories. Another one was about a girl who went to the Bahamas to go find her long-lost dad, and it was kind of just these out-there ideas that I was exploring with. So that's pretty much how I started writing longer fiction with those 2 previous books.
What inspired you to do this writing?
It was purely out of fun. It was just something that I enjoyed, so it was kind of like a hobby. I was never too good at sports, so for me,
I can relate to that.
Yeah, so for me, I found, I guess, another outlet to put my energy into. So I would, come home from school sometimes, and I would just play around, write short stories, write poems, write diary entries and stuff like that. So it pretty much evolved from pure hobby.
Did you get any encouragement from your teachers?
I was very shy. I never told half of my teachers what I was doing. When my book came out, people didn't even know I was a writer, aside from my very close friends. But of course, when my teachers did know about it, they were always eager to hear, and they were really supportive. So that was always great. But I was definitely shy about it. I still am shy about it. So it wasn't something that I really publicized. It was just kind of my own thing.
So tell us about Confessions.
So my book takes place actually in my hometown. Now, I wrote it when I was 14. Well, 13. I published it when I was 14. So now looking back on it, I could tell how much it was loosely based on my life. Not the main idea of it, but definitely short stories within the book. And it's basically just about a girl her name's Paige, and she's 17, and she's just going through the teenage tribulations of high school and dealing with a family
There are
issue.
teenage tribulations in high school?
Yeah, would you believe it? Yeah, and so it's dealing with how she deals with the surface level stuff like boyfriend issues and friend problems, and deciding whether she wants to switch high schools or not. And then more of the larger issue of she realizes that her parents are getting divorced, and to her that is the end of the world.
How does she deal with that?
Well, the readers will find out, but it does. It does start with her.
Excellent.
With her being very angry about it and very worried that it's going to ruin her whole life. And I mean, that's how the start of the book takes off, and then it ends up. She really ends up coping with it through her town, her friends, her family, and takes readers on a journey of that.
I read the book, and one of the interesting themes in the book I thought was the way she handled boyfriends. Is this autobiographical?
Not necessarily, no.
So the first boyfriend is really a friend. He's like, right?
Yeah.
Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah. He was someone that she kind of knew around. So that was the first.
But he
the
sounded
first
really
relationship.
nice. Why did she throw him over?
Because she needed to meet someone new in order to grow.
Okay. All right, so it's a book about growth, you think?
I would definitely say it's a book about growth. It's a book about, maturing, which is what a lot of teenagers are going through. And sometimes they don't realize it, but they really are.
You had told me that you had an experience in the 6th grade that somehow played into your writing this book. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah. It's not as much of a big part of the book, but there are snippets. When I entered middle school, I had a terrible transition from intermediate school to middle school, and it was to the point where I got sick in the morning to go to school, and I hated school, and I didn't want to be in school. I didn't want to have anything to do with school, but obviously you have to go to school. So
They're tense about that, yes.
Yeah, pretty much. My parents were too. So I dealt with a lot in the beginning of 6th grade. And when I wrote this 2 years later, I had completely loved school. Like, my transformation was incredible. And I just thought that it was time for me to be able to get out my situation in writing, because I had heard from other younger kids who would come talk to me because they knew about my transition, that they were going through something similar. So I kind of used it as a tool for myself to work through everything that I had gone through, as well as trying to help everyone else and show them that things do get better.
So when in this process did you decide to publish it?
Not until the very end. Like I said, I started the book and I didn't even know it was going to be a book. I started it completely for fun. I had no idea what it was going to be about. I kind of just had a character in mind, and I started playing with her story, and then from there, everything snowballed. So to me, I didn't even have a clear-cut ending in my mind when I started. It was just kind of like, oh, well, I'm doing this for me. And then towards the end, people wanted to read it. And so I was sending it to people via Microsoft Word, through emails, or I was printing it out, or I was reading it to my friends over the phone. And then, my parents were like, well, why don't we do something with it? And I was like, okay. And it kind of went from there.
Okay, so did your parents find the publisher?
Yeah, my dad did.
Okay.
He did a lot of research with that.
And you self-published. So can you tell me about that experience? What was that like?
It was really interesting because with self-publishing, you have a lot of control over everything that's going on, which is pretty unique. So they, the publishers, read through your manuscript. They either accept or reject it. Then once they accept it, you go through a bunch of editing rounds, and they send back track changes. And I mean, that took a whole long time.
It did,
Yes.
yeah, because I self-published too, and a lot of people are under the misconception, I think it's a misconception, that when you self-publish, you hand in a manuscript and they put it into printed form.
No.
And it isn't like that at all.
No.
You're right, they read it and they decide whether or not they're going to accept it.
Yeah.
And this is actually the same for if you want to put your book in ebook format on Barnes and Nobles and Amazon. Yes, you can submit anything, but that doesn't mean that they're going to accept it. There are certain industry standards. And then I was also impressed with the editorial services.
Yeah, they were really great. I think I went through my manuscript 3 times, and by the end I was like, I never want to see this again.
Yeah, I know.
It was long
almost
and
had
it was
it
brutal.
memorized,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. I was like, I know what happens. So it was a long process. It was very cool to be able to see their thoughts. They had me take out a whole chapter, the last chapter of my book. And I mean, they they don't tell you have to do that. It's just a suggestion. I took most suggestions, and I mean, I respected their suggestion, so I did decide to take out the last chapter. But they do make drastic changes. They do really help shape your book, grammar included.
Absolutely.
So it is a long process. It did take several months to go through, especially being in school at the time,
Right.
to go through the manuscript.
Now, you had a well-formed manuscript that you handed into them, but they will offer you this, self-publishing services, or companies will offer you ghostwriters. They will offer you developmental, they call it developmental editing, which means they're really writing the story for you.
Yeah.
So I was amazed at that. I was amazed at the breadth of services that they would offer you to get that book published.
Yeah.
And does this give you any idea of how you think, well, let me ask you this first. Would you ever try to get it traditionally published?
That book in particular? Not that book in particular, because I feel that it's done its job. I've got it out as far as I wanted to get it out. For me, if I decide to publish another book in the future, would I maybe try? Possibly. Would I go back with self-publishing if I had the time to market? Yes.
Yes, well, that's a very key sentence that you just said, if you have the time to market.
Yes.
However, I've heard from many authors that even when they traditionally publish, they have to do, unless you're famous,
Yeah.
unless you've already written a bestseller,
Yeah.
that you do a lot of your own marketing anyway.
And that's why it's a lot of the same playing field. People don't necessarily realize that until you go through the process and see that it's the same thing. Like, I mean, my book sold in the UK as opposed to people who are, traditionally published as well.
I know.
So,
but it's really so easy to get your book on Amazon and so easy to get it on a lot of venues
Yeah.
that I really think that I feel that the whole publishing industry is evolving.
it is, and that's for sure.
I am thinking that at some point what you're going to have is the publishing companies will be publishing your books pretty much for a price, and that they will turn more to marketing services.
Yeah, I agree. And you can just tell because of the whole ebook thing and how everything's changing with that as well, that it's easy for people to put their writing on ebooks and Kindles.
I went with a company that put my books in ebook format, all the ebook formats, for every reader,
Yeah,
and they distribute worldwide.
right, exactly. So if people can start doing that,
The publishing companies have to
everything's
keep up.
going to change, exactly.
They have to do something about it.
Yeah.
How did you go about marketing the book when it first came out?
I think it was unique in my sense that I was 14 when I published it. I grew up in a small town, and so once one person heard about it, the rest of the world heard about it. I never really went out telling people about it. Like I said, I was shy about it. So marketing kind of came to me, I'd say. I, was asked to have book signing at the Locust Valley Library, and then from there was someone who came all the way from Suffolk County, the Suffolk County Reading Council, and he had sat in on my book signing. I didn't realize who he was until the end, and he had asked me later if I would like to participate in an author panel in 2010. So that was even like a year and a half later. So then I spoke at the author panel, and then from there, someone had asked me to speak at like Westchester High School, like one of the high schools in Westchester, and that's kind of how it evolved. So I think marketing in itself came from just local newspapers picking it up. At first, I put it on Facebook, and then I never really kept up with it because, like I said, I was shy.
Well, that's a full-time job also, keeping up with the social media.
And back then, the Facebook was like a group. It wasn't like a like page, so it was different. I don't even think it really got the point across. Like I never used Twitter back then. So social media is really now has a lot to do with marketing. I haven't marketed this book in a really long time.
Right. You're busy.
Yes, I am. And so basically, that was pretty much, word of mouth, like my parents sending emails, friends sending emails to other friends, family that lived in Colorado. And so from there, kind of just, I guess, snowballed.
Yeah, that's pretty...
So for me, I never really went above and beyond with marketing. I think part of the reason was because I was still a student. I was really shy about it. And to me, it was like, whoever reads it kind of thing.
Now, what was the most challenging part about this experience with this book?
The most challenging part, I would say, was definitely the editing process. For me, writing it was just fun. Like I wasn't on a deadline. Like I said, I did it as a pure hobby. So I never had anyone on my back like, oh, we need 3 chapters.
Right.
So for me, the editing was hard because I had people who were like, okay, I need to see this in a few weeks. And I'd be like, okay, well, I have homework and I have extracurriculars and stuff. So I think that was definitely difficult. And also, having to read it 3 times. And
Did you have the feeling when the editors were making suggestions about your book, how dare you? How dare you say this about my baby?
yeah, sometimes I did, but I always had a really open
What do
mind.
you mean cut that character?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I always had an open mind, and I guess I was also really young, so like I was just being shaped then. So to me, they were like a huge help. And to me, I was like, not to say that I agreed with everything that they said, and if I didn't agree, I didn't change it. I was like, it's my book, it's my writing, it's my words. But for the most part, I did feel that they had a lot of insightful things to say. So, and I was thankful for that because it was a different perspective. It wasn't like sitting with my friend who wouldn't necessarily be like, I don't like that part.
I have to talk to you when you publish your second book, simply because when I published my first book, I listened to everything they said.
Yeah.
And I followed it to the
Yeah.
letter. The second book, not so much.
Yeah.
The second book, it was more like, no, I really like that.
Right.
No, I don't think the story should go in that direction. I want it to go in this direction.
Yeah.
I was more confident.
Right. And a lot of it has to do, with how you feel because it is your book and it is your writing. And I think like I did listen to a lot of their grammar stuff, which was like a godsend. And I did listen to some of their plot stuff, but at the same time I was like, well, I'm writing for teenagers and I'm a teenager and you're not a teenager. So for me, this works out better in my mind.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that they get counted that a lot. And the best part?
The best part? It was definitely seeing it all bound together when I got my first copy. It was like really exciting. But I wouldn't even say that was the best part. I would say the best part is when, you hear from people that you don't even know that find you on Facebook or send you an email and are like, I cried when reading your book, or your book changed my life, or your book changed my perspective on the way, my parents' divorces, or your book changed my way on how to deal with issues in adjustment. So I think that's still rewarding to hear when you've kind of sparked something in someone else's mind.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's the readership.
Yeah,
It's
and
the
definitely.
readership. When somebody sends you that email or writes something on Amazon or whatever, and wow, that was a really good
Yeah.
story. I couldn't wait to get home from work to turn the page
Right,
and find out what
exactly.
I was gonna. That's really. To me, that was the meat. It was, getting it in my hand. It
Yeah.
was so funny because the day I received the book from the publisher, I had an appointment I had just had knee surgery, and I had an appointment with the doctor, and went to the doctor's office and says, you have to read this book. He was like,
Great.
what? It's a mystery for a teenage girl, and maybe in between operations I'll be able to get to that. But you are. It's so exciting. And then
It is.
By the same token, there are times when you get really discouraged.
Yeah.
When you're trying to market and you're trying to get it out there, or you're suffering from writer's block, then you look at the book and you try to remember how good it felt,
Yeah.
so that you can be inspired again. Do you ever have writer's block?
All the time.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What do you do for it?
I just try and write like different like short pieces about like random things, and from there I try and make it into like a story.
Now, I noticed from what you told me about your college career that it has nothing to do with writing.
Yeah, it doesn't actually.
And, you did tell me that you started out being interested in journalism.
Yes.
So what happened with that?
I was interested in journalism. I wrote for my high school newspaper and I loved it. I tried writing in college and I liked it too. But for me, I was like, okay, well, I like writing. I don't want to major in creative writing, so I'm going to do journalism. And then once you think long and hard about it, I was like, I'm more creative. Like I like the fluff in the books and stuff, and you don't really find that in journalism as much. It depends what type of journalism you go into. But for me, I totally changed my mind and decided that writing would still be a part of my life. It'll always be a part of my life, but it's always been a hobby. And why not keep it a hobby and be able to do something else and always have that still?
Right. Yeah, journalism is I think it's a completely different, I was married to a journalist at one time, completely different type of writing,
Yeah,
because it's research, it's truth, you have to try to keep your bias out of it,
Yep.
and it's sometimes very nitty gritty, whereas when you write a story, it's the way you want it to go.
Exactly. So
You can editorialize all you want.
yeah, and that's why I shied away from it.
Yeah, well, I think it's important, though, to, expose yourself to different kinds of writing to know
and I
whether or
mean,
not.
I interned for a newspaper last summer, and I loved it.
That must have been fun.
Yeah, so it's not to say that it'll never be in my future, but I do know that I am more of a creative writer than a journalistic writer, and that's more of what I enjoy. So why not try and study different things and get involved in different things and always keep my writing as a hobby.
Have you ever thought about revitalizing this book and using it for fundraising or using it to reach out to teenagers? You're interviewing young kids with problems right now.
Yeah, I sometimes mention it during my intakes because I have people who say that they write, and I'm like, oh, well, you should, keep writing. Like, I wrote a book, and they're like, oh, I can't write a book. I'm like, yes, you can.
Oh, yeah.
Like, who's to say that you can't write a book? So I use it in that sense. Would I ever bring it back? I mean, I still get checks in the mail. I still,
But I mean, really,
really
work at
working on
it
it?
too.
Probably not. For me, that was something that was
then.
during that time. And now, when I start something else and I have the time, I would put all my energy into that.
So what are you thinking about for the next book? Anything at all? Have you got any projects in mind?
Well,
if you could write the bestseller, what would you write?
that's the issue. I haven't had an idea.
Let's guarantee that you would have the next bestseller. What would you write about?
Well, I want to say last year, I contacted Laura Perfetti, who was the lady that we did the charity book signing for
Right.
her daughter that has neurofibromatosis.
Right.
And we had spoken, and I was just always very moved by her story, and just all the efforts that she has gone through to fundraise, and all the opportunities that she's been given because of that. So I had said, your story would make a great book, and she's like, well, I've always wanted that, but I don't really have time to write it. And I was like, well, why don't I write it? And she was like, okay. So we had met last year a few times when I was home on break, and I compiled a lot of interviews and a lot of material, and I wrote a few chapters of the book, and I still have it. And I didn't have the time when I went back to school to be able to interview and write.
Right.
And in order for it to be something really successful, which is what I'd want the best for her and her family, I knew that I had to put it on the side. So if I ever had the time, obviously I would love to go back to that. And I don't really care about making a profit from it. I would have wanted to donate half the money to the Children's Tumor Foundation. So that's something that's still a project that I always keep in the back of my mind, and would love to start again when I have the time.
Well, Karen Bonet, another author, and I do a workshop called So You Want to Write a Story. So the next time I do it, I'll email you about it.
great.
And she could send, not you, but she could come, and then she would learn about the process, and then she could help you out
Yep.
and get that book out there.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great story.
And that would be nonfiction. Very
Yes.
different from
Yeah.
this one. So you'd have to research the disease.
Yeah,
and-
I did most of that. I have most of the logistics of that taken care of already when I had started the book. So
Have you ever thought about using, you go to University of Delaware, I'm sure they have a radio station. Have you ever thought about using they do a lot of talk radio in universities. Have
Yeah,
you thought
yeah.
about doing a show like this there and talking about the book? And
I haven't, but maybe after this experience I will.
yeah, there's really a big market out there. In fact, I'm thinking about going back to my alma mater, St. John's, and
Yeah.
saying, hello, you gave me my education, how about you let me talk about my books?
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see what happens. So, let's see. What do you see your life evolving into? When you graduate from college, what are you going to do?
Well, that's a great question. I still have no clue.
Because I'm looking, the reason why I'm asking this question and why I try to put it in a specific context is because you have a lot of talents. You already know a lot of your talents.
Yeah, well, I do a lot of work with nonprofits. I am involved in a nonprofit at the University of Delaware called Lori's Hands, which is dedicated to helping elderlies with chronic illnesses, and we do a lot of work with grocery shopping and house cleaning and stuff. So I'm president of that club at the University of Delaware, and now it's evolving into a nonprofit, and it'll end up being a service learning class. And it's going to be launched at the University of Delaware. It's going to be about healthcare in America. And so I do a lot of work with that stuff, and I mean, I love my internship. So I can definitely see myself maybe working in some kind of nonprofit sector in the future.
Well, I see that. I see sociology major,
Yeah.
and I see your involvement from the time you were a kid, a little kid,
Yeah.
in all of this nonprofit
Yeah.
stuff.
So I do
which
really
is-
enjoy that.
And you also write, and
And that's helped me a lot, like for all the nonprofits. I'm also a board member of Capital City Young Writers, which is a
oh, tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a nonprofit based in California, and it's about educating young children on the art of writing and connecting them with resources. So I got involved in that in 9th grade, and I'm still involved in it now. And basically, I maintain the blog, and I'll attend conferences when they're in New York, and I get connected with other young writers who may need some guidance. So my writing has always, my love for writing has always come in handy with being able to tie it into also the nonprofit stuff. Like I've been able to do a lot of write-ups and reach out to newspapers about getting the word out, or writing for their website, or sending out emails. So it definitely all goes hand in hand, which is nice.
Yes, because I can see that you can get involved in all of this, the fundraising and that aspect of it, but that you're writing, and even writing this book about the Profetti family and some of the other issues that you'll come across, that writing talent and being able to put it in a book form that people would want to read about could be a wonderful combination of careers.
Exactly, and that's what anyone can hope for. So
yeah, it's interesting to see how many high school students are so involved in giving back to the community. It's really heartening to see that.
Yeah.
You hear so many stories about teenagers getting involved in drugs and bullying and all the rest of it. There's another side to it.
There is, yeah.
And I would say that the side that we like to look at is probably over 90% of kids.
Yeah.
Is that your experience?
I had a large friend group who was really involved in Interact in high school, and who would do anything to do it. So I think that it's definitely taking a turn, and people really do like helping others.
Well, I expect to hear great things about
Thank
you,
you.
Alexa.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming and talking to us about